My name is Osman Habib. I am the chair of Luton's Young Liberals. I am assistant within that role. I'm standing to be a councillor in 2027 with the Lib Dems.
Okay, brilliant. And you messaged me on Instagram that saying that you were sad that I didn't like the Liberal Democrats and you wanted to debate me about the Liberal Democrats and their positions. Is that a rough, reasonable summation of the conversation that we had?
Yeah, basically.
So what is your contention with my positions on the Liberal Democrats?
So, to explain my contention, right, I would have to firstly say about why I support the Liberal Democrats.
Go ahead, make the
Um,
case.
Yep. So basically, my point with the Lib Dems is, firstly, I used to be Labour, right? And
Okay.
I was door knocking in 2024. My local MP, I loved her, and then I came to another local MP because Luton's got two MPs, Rachel Hopkins. And what happened with Rachel Hopkins is when I asked her about the two-child benefit cap, because it was the 2 days before when I spoke to her, it was the two-child benefit cap vote. When I asked her about it, I basically tried to like grill her a bit, and I asked her about it, and she turned around and she said, "Who are you?" She basically looked me in the eye and like was stunned and basically just said, "Who the hell are you?" And at
Okay.
that point, I was shocked. I was done with Labour, and I emailed the Green Party. And now I know you're one for the Greens. Am I right?
True, true, I am indeed.
Yeah. So I signed up to the Green Party, and signed up for email updates, whatnot. And I emailed my local Green, not councillors, but prominent in the Central Bedfordshire Green Party, and no one got back to me. And then I came across the Lib Dems, and now the Lib Dems, right, are the opposition to the Labour Council in Luton. And I met them, and I spoke to them, and I spoke more with them, and I became one of them, right? And now the reason is behind that. The reason behind that is because I probably associate myself most with John Rawls' philosophy, and it's the belief of equal basic liberties and promoting fairness, dignity, social solidarity, and that goes into looking at universal healthcare and universal welfare for all. And that is basically what brings me to the Lib Dems. I also stand with what Ed Davies said and Charles Kennedy, whether that was on Iraq or Palestine, and that is why I'm here. Now, when you were speaking to Aaron about the Lib Dems, and I've also seen that you made another video a few weeks ago about the Lib Dems, maybe a few months ago.
It was a month ago, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. Sorry. And you were talking about. Am I right in saying that in 2010 you voted Lib Dem?
I did vote for the Liberal Democrats in 2010, I did, yeah.
Yes, I remember. And what happened was, now I get the point. It's about Nick. Would I say that you're disenfranchised with the Lib Dems? Mainly at that time about Nick Clegg and tuition fees.
No, it wasn't about tuition fees. It was mostly about austerity. It was continually passing conservative budgets. Like, the student fee stuff was bad, right? But at the end of the
Yeah,
day, I think that was a real kind of fly in the ointment on the 330,000 excess deaths that the
yeah.
austerity regime that was imposed by the coalition government inflicted on the country.
100%. 100%. I agree with that, and I'm completely against austerity. And lots of Lib Dem MPs and councillors were also against that austerity measures, but they were just kind of like roped in by their party. And that is happening, like say today. Like it may not sound like plausible, but it's happening today with Labour, in a way. Loads of their councillors and MPs are completely against what they're doing. And yet they keep pushing out this agenda by Morgan McSweeney and Keir Starmer, and they just don't buy into the fact that nobody wants it. No Labour member wants it either. Even when votes are completely crumbling, they don't buy into it. And so that's my first point: is that you can't say flat out that yeah, had a hand in it. I completely agree. They facilitate Cameron's government because they could have pulled out at any moment. But I just don't feel like you can flat out say that the Lib Dems, they've enabled this. And every single Lib Dem, like even to this day, they allowed that to happen. We can't all like go back to them. Do you get
But
what I'm
this
saying?
wasn't just. But this wasn't just like the unilateral decisions of Nick Clegg. Like, if we're going to make this comparison between what
Yeah.
was happening with the Liberal Democrats under the coalition and Morgan McSweeney, right? Insofar as essentially Labour together have done a soft coup on the party where they lied to the membership. Now,
Yeah.
And then the membership broadly, they hate everything, basically, that the Morgan McSweeney kind of Politburo are inflicting. And whilst I don't doubt that there are lots of Liberal Democrats who think that what happened during the coalition was bad, they still voted for Nick Clegg and the Orange Book Liberals in 2010. And we now have another Orange Book Liberal in charge of the Lib Dems at the moment in the form of Ed Davey too. They did so in the full knowledge that he was an Orange Book Liberal, right? Like, whilst there were certain things in terms of the policy they put forward to the electorate of that election, in terms of the actual political rhetoric, looking back, because I was uneducated when I voted for them, looking at the manifesto, the pledges that were made, right? This kind of, again, Orange Book liberalism was all over the leadership and all over their political platform at the time, right? This wasn't a unique part of the fact that they were forced into being part of the administration with the Conservative government because of electoral maths and they wanted to keep the country stable. Foremost, like Nick Clegg broadly aligned with neoliberal deregulatory economics. It's why people like Vince Cable didn't just do things because they were roped into doing so. They were offered ministerial positions and actively drew up things such as the bargain basement sell-off of Royal Mail. Like this wasn't kind of accidental complicity, it was direct complicity. And whilst there may be some members who were in disagreement, and obviously I'm sure a lot of them disagree right now because of how politically toxic the coalition is, to the point at which they don't even recognise that the Conservative government started in 2010. They'll say things like, well, it's been 9 years of Tory government. Well, it was actually really 14 years, just with the Lib Dems propping them up for a while. This was something that was part of the Liberal Democrat kind of philosophy at the time, especially on the economy. In terms of social policy, we have no issue. I think basically all of Lib Dem's social policy is fine. We agree on things like internationalism and asylum. We on international trade policy, like we want to approach America, I think that's fine too. And on things like LGBTQ plus rights, they're also great with that as well. But I'm an economics focused channel really, and I can't see where the divergence between the MPs and the members is so vast as it is in Labour, if you see what I mean. Especially when Christine Jardine, who's was a front bencher until last week, was literally up until the kind of electoral period speaking to Nish Kumar on Pod Save the UK, still rerunning like neoliberal arguments about public sector spending and the Liam Bunn note in the Treasury and austerity was necessary, right? That's still being defended by front benchers to this day, you know?
So what I would say to that is, firstly, in terms of them actually voting them in, I understand that point, but could we not just apply that to Starmer? We did vote, Labour did vote in Starmer, although he did come up with a completely different set of policies. I believe it was his 7 policies that were completely different and all completely broken. 7 pledges, I believe.
10 pledges, but you're absolutely right. Yeah, there was the difference here. The big difference that I'm pointing out here, as you say, is that the Starmer campaign to become leader was entirely lies. It was all lies. It was essentially a con job to try and soft coup the party and expel the left. Whereas when Nick Clegg was elected as leader, it was open information, just in the same as Tony Blair did in 1996 or 1994, was it, when John Smith died? That it was open and saying we are going to be doing a kind of a deregulatory free market approach to the economy. Like these were open positions that they were advocating for, rather than trying to dupe the membership as Starmer was. That's the difference, you know.
Yeah. So with that free market approach, I would say I would say 2 things, and I would say that Ed Davey is an orange book liberal, like you said, and he champions liberal beliefs, but in the context of how he's applied it, and say in like when it comes to his manifesto pledges, it's actually quite left or unpopular. I would say. So, say for example, he maintains the liberal pledge that about free market economics, how you're saying, breakdown of trade barriers and whatnot. And a way in which he's doing that is he's very pro Remain, and and the Lib Dems are the only party, I believe, in Parliament who actually talk about rejoining the EU, whether it's in slow phases and whatnot. So what I would say to that is that yes, they champion liberal policies, orange book liberalism, but in the way Ed Davey applies it, I'm not talking about Nick Clegg, but in the way that Ed Davey applies it, it would be in a centre left or unpopular manner, in a way that, when I say unpopular manner, I mean not giving into that Brexit push. That say Keir Starmer, that reform push, Keir Starmer, Kemi Baden, they're all pushing into, they're all like trying to out reform in that way.
Okay, well, a couple of things there. Insofar as I disagree with your characterization of the Liberal Democrat manifesto on the economy as being centre left. I would say so on social policy, absolutely. It was definitely centre left stuff in terms of social policy. But on the economy, right, like they stopped short of being as progressive as Labour on the economy. For example, like there's no turning of the investment capital from the things like the British Business Bank. There was no wealth fund here. They weren't going to change this in terms of government shares in these particular companies. It wasn't an equity program. They were essentially going to continue the conservative policy of continual business subsidy. This is neoliberal. This is not progressive, right? It's giving money to the capitalist sector to make money out of that without getting a return for the state. There was no policy on railway nationalisation. There was no policy on water nationalisation. In fact, they wanted to have like public service companies. They are actively opposing nationalisation. Do you see what I mean? Like in terms of even like the broad strokes of where the Labour Party was being good on progressive economic policy, such as in the National Wealth Fund, the level of climate investment, industrial strategy, and on what kind of sparse nationalisation that they were even proposing. The Lib Dems didn't even kind of get to that point. And then when it comes to the European Union, like, well, at this point, given the state of the public finances and what we're going to need to do in investment, things like the excessive deficit protocol, things like Article 123 of the Lisbon Treaty are going to prevent this government now from engaging in would have prevented this government from engaging in the kind of expansionary policy necessary to rebuild our shattered infrastructure. Actually, I don't think that necessarily the free trade policies, which I have some skepticism of internally within the EU. Like I do agree with their broader kind of protectionist outside the EU to protect internal EU markets, but in terms of the internal free trade policy of the European Union, I don't think that would necessarily lead to the additional revenue that would be available to be able to put into capital, the necessary capital investment to be able to rebuild the country. And even then, I don't think they would do the capital investment anyway, broadly, because again, as I said, they're looking to create more avenues for private investment rather than engaging in an expansion of the public sector. They don't have any key kind of tax rises outside of the digital services tax broadly. In terms of progressive taxation, they opposed the tax on private schools and the changes to agricultural property reliefs, explicitly benefiting the richest in society who go to private school and multi-millionaires that are farmers. I don't see anything progressive here outside of, maybe not doing the kind of grotesque cuts that the Labour Party were doing. But then you can just go to the Green Party and get progressive macro policy and also good policy on welfare reform and all the same progressive social policy that you get from the Dems.
Okay, so what I would say to that is, firstly, when we're talking about the water companies, you're right in saying that the Lib Dems oppose nationalisation on the water companies, and they did it on the basis that it's too expensive, we should be putting our money elsewhere. But what did they put instead? They wanted to end the scandal by essentially turning the water companies into public benefit companies. They wanted to ban bonuses for water bosses until discharges and leaks, which are a major issue in terms of our water companies, are fixed. And also wanted to replace Ofwat with a tough new regulator with new powers to prevent sewage dump. So although, yes, they are opposed to nationalisation in that way, they have put out numerous policies and they put out even more in their manifesto, talking about how they would replace that need from nationalisation and how they would fix that issue. In terms of what else was said, we were talking about the economy and you said that, I don't think they're centre left in that way. Well, I would say that there are multiple policies on increasing taxation on the rich show that they are centre left in that way. Now, for the last few months, with the approach of Gary Stevenson onto the scene, we've been talking about wealth tax, and the Lib Dems, although not speaking for a wealth tax, have put out multiple calls for, say, for example, reversing conservative cuts to big banks. They want an increase on the digital services tax from 2% to 6%. They want to reform capital gains tax so that it's more proportionate. They also want to introduce a tax on corporate share buybacks, which basically promotes reinvesting into the UK rather than returning profits to shareholders. All of these policies are, firstly, anti-conservative, what they were doing, anti-right-wing, but they're not centrist either. They're on the left, and the reason why I'd say that's on the left is because we're talking about policies to fund investment into education, into healthcare, rebuilding the NHS, more GP appointments, whatnot. That screams left to me. Now, obviously, you might have something to say about that.
I mean, I'm not necessarily saying it's not left wing, but in terms of the level of revenue that this would raise and the transfer of wealth from the rich to the poor, like the change in property rights, right? This was the Yanis Varoufakis test all of those years ago when there was the potential to oust the Conservatives, where there was a potentially ruling out of a coalition with the Lib Dems under Joe Swinton at the time, who was also pretty much an orange book liberal in that regard as well, was that, well, unless they're actually looking at changing the model of ownership here, right? Sorry, but yeah, like, unless we're looking at changing the model of ownership here, as we're transferring property rights from the few to the many, then that's the kind of the test that I have for. I mean, again, whether they are centre or left wing or centrist or whatever, of course, lots of people are going to have different distinctions about where that line is, where the Overton window is. But in terms of the principles that I want to see, in terms of the issues that face our country, of course, we want to raise more revenue, but the kind of changes to the banking levy and digital services are not going to be huge revenue raises in the same way that the increase in national insurance on the employer side was from Rachel Reeves, for example, or the increase in capital gains tax. And whilst I'm glad that Lib Dems also want to reform capital gains tax as well to increase revenue, again, like, the state of the kind of levels of taxation that we are going to need to fund a proper social democratic, at the very least, public realm is going to be way higher than what either the Lib Dems or the Labour Party are offering us, and the Greens are basically the only party offering the kind of levels of taxation that we need. On top of this, the big problem, as you pointed out, is what Gary Stevenson is talking. It's wealth ownership. And those taxes that you're mentioning there, whilst they may raise some amount of revenue and they do target the wealthiest, I'm not opposed to them. Is that really fixing the central problem here, which is that at the end of the day, we need to make sure that the assets that are currently owned by corporations, by the richest in society, by the oligarchs, get transferred into to working class, cooperative or state hands to ensure that the revenue from those benefits the many, not the few. Do you see what I mean? Like, that's what I want to see from a political party, and the Lib Dems don't offer that.
So what I would say to that is, recently a professor came onto Novara Media. I believe he was talking to Michael Walker. Also, I just want to put it out, I'm a big fan of Novara Media. I didn't mention that before. Big fan, and I came to the recent downstream when you guys were talking to Faisal Sheen and Jean-Luc. That was great, by the way. I just want to put that out there.
Thank you very much. I mean, I'll pass that on to Aaron. I've got another fan.
Yeah, so what I want to say is that recently a professor came onto Novara Media, and I believe he was speaking to Michael, and he was talking about wealth tax. And it's the same point that, we believe a wealth tax could make 10 to 15 billion, but how it actually works and the administration of it, would it be as effective as we think it is? So with your point of, will these policies be as effective as we think they are? Will they be able to actually fund properly what we're talking about? I don't think a wealth tax would, but these policies that we were talking about, the Lib Dems estimate that they would raise 30 billion a year. They're not wacky numbers like reforms, wacky 70 billion, 90 billion, whatever. It changes every day. Net zero policies, in terms of scrapping them. These are like more concrete and not wacky numbers. 30 billion would be enough to help fix the footfall from the NHS, not the footfall, the deficit from the NHS. In terms of the NHS, they would talk about a 9 billion increase in funding for it. And that would be really great for the NHS. When, in terms of the NHS, like, flat out policies that Lib Dem placed, they were talking about, in terms of cancer rates, they wanted to make independent commissions and fund research for the lower survival rates of cancer. They wanted to make sure that everyone who gets an urgent referral for cancer treatment is seen within 62 days. I'm not just trying to throw Lib Dem policies out there, but the reason why I'm saying that is because they have put out a flat out number on how much they think they can raise. They have shown how they can do it. With Labour, they what did they do? Say the private school that raised about 1.7 billion, but I'm talking about 30 billion here. I do believe you're right in the private school sense. I actually do agree with you there, but I do feel like is the same thing about arguing over small amounts of money when we could be raising so much more.
I mean, I'm totally agree with it. I don't think these taxes are bad taxes. I would like to see these kind of things implemented. But then you compare this to example for what the Green Party were proposing, which was, double that, close to 60 billion that we were looking at raising. And even then, like, as I said, like, when it comes to things like wealth taxes, it's not just a method of revenue raising for the state, it's also a way of being able to ensure that assets become liquid again. It is the concentration of assets amongst the rich, amongst the few, amongst the people at the top of society that need transferring back into public or worker or cooperative owned hands, Do you see what I mean? Like, in terms of the broad strokes of the economy, like, I'm not saying that the Lib Dems were just offering conservatism Mark II. That was clearly, obviously, to the left of what we had before. But in terms of the level to which the public realm would increase, it's not even being as high as increase as Labour, given that they've nationalised at least the train operating companies. Obviously, the rolling stock is still in private hands, but the train operating companies have been nationalised, which the Lib Dems didn't want to do. And even like when you look at the military housing, that's been nationalised, right? Like, and I'm not a Labour fan. You know my content. You've watched me on Novara Media. You see the things I do and say. I don't like the Labour Party, right? And if my yardstick is, are the Lib Dems offering an economic policy platform that is more progressive than the Labour Party? Well, the answer is no, because the overall level of public expenditure and the overall level of tax as a percentage of GDP, for example, would be higher now that Labour have won the election than if the Lib Dems had won instead. And when it comes to the political positions that they take publicly, they're out there defending rich people. They're out there defending the broadly high-income earners, who are the people who vote for the Liberal Democrats. To be fair, these kind of people also vote for Labour as well. If you want to look at poor people, they basically at this point only vote in terms of the higher percentage than everywhere else in the economy for the Greens and the Reform Party. But again, the scale of the problem that the Lib Dems look like they're trying to solve, again, and I'm just thinking of this from a broader perspective. I don't think they align with my values because I'm a socialist, and they're not socialists. They oppose socialist policy. Their platform involves restricting the ability for trade unions to fund political parties. Like, as a trade unionist, that directly opposes my values. But even on terms of like the basic levels of where the public discourse is at right now in terms of broader public spending policy, they're still not as progressive as the Labour Party, who I don't think are progressive enough,
Okay. So I completely understand that. And you mentioned about the Green Party and turning wealth into liquefying them. And to that, I'd say that Lib Dems have policies that are based on that. Say, for example, in places like Cornwall and whatnot, these local councils are already affected by people who want second homes, which really squeeze out housing for other people. That's exactly what we're talking about. And what did the Lib Dems propose? They talked about a 500% increase in council tax for second homes. So I would say Lib Dems are on that thing about trying to squeeze out wealth and turn them into liquefying them for other people. I also wanted to say about, I completely understand. You're a socialist, and I've seen your content 100%. I completely understand with that. But here's what I'd say is that when it comes to our elections, right? We are in such a position where we have to be really smart with our vote. Like, I remember in 2017, obviously I shouldn't be like, I'm not trying to school you or anything. I'm just saying, like, we should be smart with our vote in that way. I remember in 2017, 2019, there used to be websites which used to say, here's how to get your local Tory out, MP out. And it'd show up with a number of left parties and whatnot. And I just think that's what we have to do today. So I wouldn't advise anyone not to vote Green. I wouldn't advise that at all. Greens have a lot of policies that I adore. Zach Polanski, for example, I've actually seen him at a talk, and I adore him as well. But what I would say is that we have to use our vote smartly. Now, say in Luton, a place like mine, the Lib Dems are the opposition, right? The Greens don't have a standing. And that's why when I told you that I signed up to be a Green member, and I emailed them about what can I do to help, I didn't get a reply back. And that was about 7-8 months ago, and I still haven't received a reply back because they're not existent really in Luton. But who are existent and who can get out Labour? The Lib Dems. And why do I want them to get out Labour, who you say are more progressive than the Liberal Democrats? It's what they're doing. So although we can talk nationally, I just want to say about locally as well, because the Labour Party is the Luton Labour Party is an extension of the National Labour Party. And what have they done? They've completely bulldozed many of our parks, so much so that we basically got none left. They are increasing the airport from 19 million to about 33 million passengers, completely wrecking our parks again, noise, air pollution. They've completely scrapped their net zero pledges, whatnot. And what else are they doing? For example, they even had ideas to not scrap, sorry, but half the money allocated for disabled students, SEND, to get to school. And it's just a constant attack on vulnerable groups. And the Lib Dems wouldn't stand for it. So although we can say Labour's progressive, what we've seen from Labour about the winter fuel, about the two-child benefit cap, about the disabled PIP cuts, they are not progressive. And the Lib Dems have opposed all of the above. And for that kind of makes the party for me. And knowing the local councillors, knowing why they stand for the Lib Dems, that makes it for me. If you get what I'm
Okay,
saying.
well, I just want to clarify. I don't think that Labour are progressive. I'm just saying on macroeconomics, like the Lib Dems can't. They can't move. They're not doing things that are more progressive than what Labour are already doing. You know. So like, in terms of a national macro level, like outside of those welfare policies, again, we both agree on this. In terms of like the kind of fiscal rules they adopt, the kind of levels of capital investment from the state, the level to which they're happy to engage in expansionary policy, in terms of other kind of broader like the way in which they want to structure the economy, the Lib Dems still aren't as progressive as Labour, and I don't think Labour are progressive, right? So I just want to clarify that. And again, I'm not going to tell anybody how that they should vote. I would suggest I'll suggest what I think they should do. On a local level, I don't have any problem with you wanting to support the party that wants to do better in your local level. This is a completely different kettle of fish, right? If I thought I had a good Lib Dem councillor in my area that I thought was really good, I would vote for them. Luckily, I have the Broxdale Alliance I can vote for, and that's who I do vote for in my area. But you know, I'm a member of the Green Party and voting for somebody else because I think that they're best placed to beat Labour in my constituency and are more progressive. Right? I'm not gonna say that you couldn't or shouldn't vote for whoever you think is best in your local council and that specific microcosm. But on a broader party political level, this is about national politics. And again, I don't think that you've, outside of saying, well, you know, we've opposed the welfare cut, to which the Greens already oppose anyway, that you've done anything really to convince me that I'm going to be getting something that is anything close to my values from the Liberal Democrats, you know? And whilst you're saying, you know, we have to fight for our votes the last general election, I did say, because there was a potential that the Conservative Party could be put into third place, that there was a case of voting for Lib Dems tactically to get Tories out in like the southwest where you guys are strong, you know, whatever. Like I definitely said that was okay, but in terms of national voting, the only way that you can get the current government of the day, which is the Labour Party, to shift their position to the left is by threatening them electorally from the left. Because at the moment they feel threatened electorally from the right by Reform UK. If we continue to either commit our vote to people who you think that would be best placed to unseat the Tories, which would mostly leave the Labour Party in as many as 90% of constituencies, which would be Labour, which would be Conservatives or Reform, then the Labour Party are just going to continue their march rightward. And again, I think the only party that proposes genuinely progressive socialist policy that's to the left of Labour is the Green Party at this point. That's the only way you can shift the paradigm here, outside of a couple of marginal seats where the Lib Dems are best placed to beat the Tories or Reform than Labour. Do you see what I mean? And again, like, in terms of a national campaigning platform, it's got to be something that's actually going to deal in the real necessary solutions to our broken economy. And I guess I said, from what you've said so far, I don't think that the Lib Dems offer anything, again, from a socialist perspective, that would remedy those kind of deep endemic problems.
So what I would say to that is you mentioned about the local elections, like, because obviously I was saying, and I didn't mean to put any words in your mouth, obviously. And what I would say to that is local elections are somewhat, not to a large extent, because like you said, if you had a Lib Dem councillor that you really like, you'd vote for them. But local elections are to somewhat an extent act like midterms in the US. And you can see that by Reform's rise in in the May council elections, they had the highest number of council seats. They completely destroyed Conservatives and they completely destroyed Labour. Lib Dems were obviously second, but Reform destroyed them. And these are all new councillors or disliked or Tory councillors, for example, who all switched to Reform and they all won, but they didn't win because they're councillors or because of their name. They won because they had that Reform name backing. And so when it comes to the council elections, I would say vote whatever you can to get like Labour, Tories, reform out. And then when it comes to nationally, in the 2029 MP election, for the first time in Luton, we're going to stand a candidate, and we're going to actually properly campaign and put out our time and effort into helping that campaign up and running. And that'll be the first time we'll do that in 2029. And we can't do that, for example, if we don't have a strong council group behind us. And we're really starting that push for 2027 to take control of the council. And if we do that in 2029, we might finally be able to unseat the Labour members in Luton. And the Green Party won't be able to do that. And I don't think Corbyn and Sultana will be able to do that. And even if the Green Party and Corbyn and Sultana face a big enough challenge, you know what's going to happen? It's going to be the exact same thing that happened to Faiza Shaheen. What happened was, obviously, independent Faiza Shaheen got about 12,500 votes. Labour got 12,900. What happened? They let in Ian Duncan Smith, one of the most prominent austerity Tory ministers back in. And I saw Pfizer in tears after that, and I literally can't see that again. We can't let vote splitting on the left dictate us. And so the reason why I say that to you about this is because you, obviously, on behalf of Novara Media and of yourself, have a platform, and you could dictate. You have a chance to dictate elections, and as do all media organizations. And I'd say to that you should urge people to vote tactically, because if we urge people to vote green and whatnot, no, not vote green, but if we just urge people to vote for one party like they did in Luton, their vote might go to waste. And if we urge them to vote smartly, if you're here, vote here. If you're in this place, vote this party. Then we have a chance. And the reason why I'm talking about chances is because I genuinely feel like we're under war, we're under threat. And Muslims, for example, as myself, might feel this a bit more. And the reason why I'm saying this is because we're literally, Sarah Pochin, for example, when she came into a parliament, the first question she asked was about banning the burqa. They're also talking about banning halal meat. GB News' recent documentary, where they showed Brixton and an autistic black man, it's a joke and it's scary. And I think these are the reasons why we need to literally work together to be smart with our vote. And if we, without being smart with our vote, we risk literally getting reform in and completely ruining our country. Trump has just come back in 2024, and he actually said in a campaign rally one time for the 2024 election that, oh, just vote me in this one time, guys, and you'll never have to vote again. What does that signal? And what's he already been talking about? A third term. We're literally risking our countries turning into fascist countries under Farage and Trump, but we just need to work together, right? The SNP, the Lib Dems, the Greens, if we literally work together, I literally feel, and I know that we can literally get them out together. And with what you said about those Tory safe seats in the South, yeah, we do need them, as you said. And if we get, because we literally can't win the MPs parliament without those safe seats, right? Why do we think that Conservatives always had a hold, and why they always fighting back is because they've always got a safe place to rely on. Even when Labour faces its biggest defeats and whatnot, they'll always have a place to rely on. Even if in 2019 their safe red wall broke down, they still always have places to rely on in the big cities like Luton, but we have a chance to get them out. And I know you said that, oh, I haven't really enticed you into voting Lib Dems. But what I would say to that is, sorry if I've been talking too much, but what I would say to that is that they have said three big things on the economy. We talk about the economy the most, about putting, reforming taxation, putting numerous policies in there to make it more proportionate, to make it more fair. They want to rejoin the EU. Now, obviously, we've seen with the OBR, they were talking about 40 billion a year on GDP. They want to bring us back into the single market, and they also want to invest in renewable power and energy and whatnot. And all of these combined literally shout to me that, oh, they want to help fix the country, right? We might have different policies than everyone else, but how can we look at that and say that, oh, maybe we shouldn't do this? This isn't progressive. Because to be honest, when I read the Lib Dem manifesto, I just don't see how it's not progressive, how it's not to the left, and how it's something that we should be careful of. I'm not saying that you said that we should be careful of it, but how it's not. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, I said if the yardstick is are they more progressive than Labour, then the answer is just categorically no. Again, like of
And
course
why is that?
The Labour manifesto was particularly empty because the Labour manifesto basically didn't have a bunch of the things that they did when they were in government. You know, they lied to the electorate. Like I don't like the Labour Party, right? But in terms of the overall level of public ownership, Labour have it higher. And in terms of the overall increase in taxation as a percent of GDP, Labour higher. In terms of the public services that they want to offer extra, in terms of things like we've now got at least some free breakfast clubs. We've got free school meals and things like that. Like these are like basic policies that the Greens obviously outperform on, right? And the Lib Dems don't even reach this level, right? In terms
Right.
of like the level of government equity in, as I said, from levels of investment, they're doing bullshit public-private partnerships, and even that is more progressive than what the Liberal Democrats are offering. Like, you're never going to get me to convince me on tactical voting, especially in a fractured electorate where basically no seat is safe anymore. And I think that whilst you're right to say that Reform UK is scary, especially if you're a Muslim, well, the Labour Party are happy to be able to fan those flames anyway, and they're taking away my rights as a trans person anyway too. So we need to force Labour to not do these things. And again, you're going to have to get progressive parties to threaten the Labour Party more often. And again, if they are not being threatened to the left on the economy, they'll also not put into place the policies that will necessarily stop the decline of the country, which is aiding reform. It is people's fear of the societal entropy of economic decline and falling living standards that is driving most of reform's vote, and that needs to be arrested, and it'll only happen through proper left-wing policy. And given that, as I said, like the biggest thing, the Joseph Rowntree Foundation have come out saying the bottom 40% are going to see their overall living standards continue to decline even after Labour put into place these policies that put more money into the pockets of working people and poor people than the Lib Dems are proposing in their manifesto, then the Lib Dems would take us back. They would take us back in terms of the necessary economic changes to arrest the rise of reform, which the Labour Party are doing to not an extent enough to be able to stop that either. So the only real platform is a properly progressive one, which will involve a transfer of ownership. It will involve public ownership. It will involve expansionary policy. It will involve big amounts of nationalisation, cooperative funds, the kind of policies that Jeremy Corbyn was offering, like the right to own, or things like the inclusive ownership funds that mean that whilst the share buyback platform from the Lib Dems is, you know, it's not bad, it's something that I support, why are we not ensuring that there is a broad share ownership of employees across the country, which is what the inclusive ownership funds would have done? That's the kind of policy that puts money back into the hands of the people who do the work, the working class people of this country who provide the wealth of our civilization through their productive labour. And what's the Liberal Democrats offer? We want to crowd in private investment. We want to make it easier for businesses. We want to ensure that we reform the kind of things that are making them more productive for themselves in terms of reinvestment by stopping share buybacks. But how are they transferring ownership of the productive parts of our economy into the hands of the working people who do the work, rather than keeping them in the hands of the ownership class, right? None of these things are going to change under any of the Lib Dem prescriptions. And on top of this, in terms of just kind of keeping the macroeconomy the same but rejigging public sector expenditure, they're still doing less than the Labour Party. They were still planning to do less than what the Labour Party are doing now as well. I just, whilst you're, I mean, again, you can happily advocate for tactical voting. And as I said, if you're in the southwest, for example, where the Lib Dems, the only best placed party at time of recording to beat Reform and the Tories, whatever, like, I'm happy to endorse that in certain circumstances. But the biggest problem here is that in a fractured electorate, you do not know who's going to win each seat. Just continually voting specifically for a political party who happens to win in 2024, when voting patterns have changed considerably in just the last year in terms of who votes where. It's up in the air, and trying to pigeonhole a specific party into each seat, I think, is a hide into nothing, really, and you'll just end up not making the votes look the way that they should go, especially in a balkanized electorate where actually most seats are going to be progressive or conservative, really, outside of a handful of kind of more kind of heterogeneous electorates. You already know really that the urban seats are going to move left, and then if the urban seats are going left, why on earth would any of those seats choose the Lib Dems over the Green Party, when, as you say, you love plenty of the Green Party policy platform, but there's a kind of tactical element to the Lib Dems, and I don't see what the point of that is in a fractured electorate when, you know, the Greens are only a couple of points behind the Lib Dems at this point, and a bigger platform that Zach Polanski could give them could make them, especially in urban seats where their vote is more concentrated, outside of the southwest, which is more Lib Dem, where the Greens be a much, much, much better place to be able to unseat a Labour MPs in those situations. Again, like, there's so many policy differences, and of course, on top of this, like, the Lib Dems have history. Again, I know that you think there's some mitigation here, but when we gave the Lib Dems power the last time, they were part of the worst government this country has basically ever had. Like, it's tough competition with the Thatcher administration, especially the third Thatcher administration, right? But the damage that the coalition government did was greater, quite frankly, than what you got from the majority Conservative governments of 2017 and 2019. It was so bad. It was so much long-term, kind of almost irreparable damage was done. And whilst there may be some good policies that you, again, I've told you I agree with and I'm happy to agree with, the record that we have from the Lib Dems is something that, whilst you need to show me that not only were they trustworthy, and that you'd have to show me policies that were more progressive than what were being offered at the moment by the current government that also isn't progressive enough. And I just don't see the case for this.
So what I would say to that is, firstly, we were talking about tactical voting, and I understand your point, but what I would argue, right, is momentum. And you said that, no seats are safe anymore. We're politically fractured. It's not guaranteed. Why would any progressive seat want to vote for the Lib Dems instead of the Green Party? And here's what I'd say to that is that getting to know local government and our local council, I've realized that it's just not that black and white. So, and my point would be momentum. So in 2029, when it comes to it, the Lib Dems are going to massively push a candidate in Luton, and they're going to do it the same way in lots of other places. And so are the Greens, and they're going to fund a campaign in these places as well. And what would go great with to fund the campaign will give us a chance of getting Labour and the Tories out. But another thing is these endorsements and whatnot, us talking about this. And if we turn around and be like, no, we should vote Green, we're a progressive seat, we're going to end up splitting the vote again. And all the momentum, all the funding, although we really tried, what's going to happen? Let's say Lib Dems get 6,000 votes, Green gets 6,000 votes, Labour's going to get 12,000 votes. Who knows? Even if Labour don't win, it might be Conservatives that might get 13,000 votes. And that's the same thing that happened to Faiza Shaheen. So although we are politically fractured in that way, we need to think about this smartly in terms of momentum, and because it's not that simple. We're talking about campaign funds and whatnot. The Green Party may not be able to fund a campaign in Luton or many other places. 47, I think it was 47 or 39 seats they were behind in the election. They were second place. And what about all the other hundreds and hundreds of seats? I know in the Green Party constitution, Zach Plansky was talking about that they have to stand in every single constituency, but they're not able to fund campaigns in all these constituencies. And so it might just be that in these constituencies that I'm talking about, like my own Luton, we need another party, and I'd say the Lib Dems. And now you were saying that you don't believe that you think that Labour is more progressive to the Lib Dems, and I just completely disagree with it. And say, for example, you talk about free school meals, and in the Lib Dem manifesto, they said that they would extend free school meals to all children in poverty, sorry, in poverty, and extend it to all primary school children when the finances are right. That is something that they already said about doing. And for example, if we're talking about our track records, are Labour now discredited, and we shouldn't at all vote Labour ever again, just because Tony Blair seemed to be Thatcher's prodigy and completely said no to nationalisation, completely brought taxes down for the rich, and completely is a war criminal in Iraq. Does that
Okay,
now
look, I mean,
diminish
on that point,
Party?
yeah, on that point, right? So yeah, like, I voted for the Liberal Democrats in 2010 because of the war, because obviously partly with student fees at the time, but also because of the war in Iraq, and there was something different, you know. Like, Charles Kennedy is somebody who brought me into the Lib Dems, you know, that or the Lib Dem kind of way of thinking, happy to make me vote for him because I thought he was good at opposing those international crimes, right? And you're right, like, until we really got like Jeremy Corbyn specifically admonishing Tony Blair and apologising for the war crimes that he committed, the Labour Party was not something that I considered voting for. I voted Green in 2015 as well as the Labour in 2017. So like, I would always agree with you actually that this track record means that I would push parties away from me, especially when none of these things were atoned for. And at the moment, as I said before, we have an Orange Book Liberal, a minister from the coalition government, as the leader of the Liberal Democrats. Somebody whose voting record during the coalition is at least partly responsible for all of the damage and destruction that this worst government of all time committed to the country. So do you see what I mean in terms of, like, if, I don't know, if, say, for example, there was somebody from, let's say, like David Miliband was leader of the Labour Party at this time, like someone who was literally part of the Blair administration. Yeah, of course, I would never vote for them. I'd never vote if David Miliband was in charge. And Starmer is just, from the kind of cut from the Blair cloth. And if, for example, the Labour Party put somebody who I knew was from the left wing of the party in charge and changed their political platform to be back to what it was 2017, 2019, or at least something approximation of what that was, then my mind would change. But the leadership of the party means that I can't trust them at all on that metric, And I'm just going to take Luton South and South. It's Luton South, South Bedfordshire, you'll see, right? Rachel Hopkins.
Luton North, but it's Luton South with us, so yeah.
Luton North, again, which is fine. I was looking at the wrong constituency. In Luton North, right, the Lib Dems were literally in last at the last election.
Yep.
So even from a tactical voting perspective, right, like it'd be easier, given the constituency profile, you'd be more likely to remove the Labour Party by voting for the Workers' Party of Britain, which is a joke party, than voting for the Liberal Democrats. But as I'm going to, obviously this was Luton North, which is Sarah Owen. To be fair, is one of the less shit Labour MPs, and the Lib Dems are still in last place. Again,
with her,
yeah, and they're still in last place. Behind, or there's the SDP were behind them, but they're also a joke party. And again, both the Workers' Party and the independent candidate, right? Workers' Party got more than double the Lib Dem vote in this constituency. This is clearly a heavy minority constituencies, and it's clear they're happy to vote for socialist parties rather than liberal parties, right? Like we had the Workers' Party, who are effectively an arm of the Communist Party. We've got an independent candidate, Turkiya Shah, and most of those independents are predominantly left-wing or at least socialist adjacent. And the combined vote total was 21% for Independent Workers' Party and 5% for the Greens. That's like 26% of opposition to Labour from the left. And then you've got the Lib Dems on 4.9%. So even in your own constituency, the tactical vote for the Labour Democrats literally makes no sense at all.
So here's what I'd say to that. And I just want to again say that it's not that simple. And the reason why I'm saying that is simple. You mentioned about the 4.9%. We got roughly 2,000 votes in that election. And if you remember what I said before, we have never actually funded a campaign or started anything in terms of our own constituencies. So when you're looking at that 2,000 votes is a lot of votes for someone's name just being on that sheet. Our party's name just on that ballot box sheet.
You were in last place. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to cut across you again. I'm not buying this. You were in last place outside of a joke party in the form of the SDP. Right? We had a paper candidate in that seat as the Green Party. We have less money than you do, and we still got more votes. And so the Workers' Party of Britain is also a joke party, and they got more than double the number of votes that you got. They're a party entirely funded essentially off of the fumes of. I mean, I guess they're not technically connected to the CPG-BML anymore, but right off of like George Galloway's kind of vanity project. And they still got more votes than Liberal Democrats in this seat.
But it's
again, there are plenty of seats. There are plenty of seats where I'm happy to admit that if you want to tactically vote, the Lib Dems are the answer, and that I probably would acquiesce to doing so if I lived in Somerset. If I lived in Somerset, for example, perfectly reasonable. I lived in what's the Geoffrey Clifton Brown or whatever it might be. Like, not a problem as far as I'm concerned. But in these progressive inner city seats, there is a gigantic base of people who want to vote for progressivism, who want to vote for social redistribution, who want to vote for internationalist policy, who want to vote for an inclusive society, right? And we've seen this in terms of like the independent candidates winning in these seats as well. And the idea that given the broad support that there is to an opposition to Labour there, we should go for the kind of the liberalism of the Lib Dems rather than a proper socialist party or an eco-populist party like Zach Polanski, who will probably have more funds if Zach becomes leader because people will join the party. Of course, we don't have the Lord Sainsbury donating to us like the Liberal Democrats do. Of course, there is still we want to become a broad-based mass movement party, and that will bring in revenue to be able to run in more seats, especially in the Greater London area, where people are very amenable to vote Green, where the Green were in second place in way more seats than the Liberal Democrats were. Even under your heuristic around tactical voting, it still makes more sense to vote for the Green Party, and you get better policies as well.
Okay, so what I would say to that is, I see what you're saying, but it's just when you look at Luton as a whole, and if you include him with the politics scene, it's just much more deeper than that. So what you were saying about Lib Dems coming last, Let's firstly not conflate us with the SDP. I think they got 87 votes in the election. We got 2,000. Secondly, when it came to the Lib Dems, we got 2,000 votes from not at all campaigning, just our name on the ballot box. And the Greens got the same, about 2,100 votes. Actually, could you tell me the numbers since it's there on your screen?
1,940. They got 50 votes more than the Liberal Democrats. Yeah. So this constituency probably, if there was going to be like some kind of tactical ability to try and stand constituencies along some kind of pact or whatever, the more likely candidate to win would be something from a theoretical Corbyn Sultana party. Seems like the ideal party to contest this from a progressive perspective.
Yeah.
They'll probably they would probably be more likely to win here than the Greens, and I would support them if they did, right? But the Greens, with a paper candidate, their increase in vote share was higher than yours. But like disaffected Labour voters went 10 times more to the Greens than the Lib Dems, who increased their voter percentage by 0.03 at a time of like record disenchantment with the two main parties. They went up 0.3%.
Yeah. So you said that our vote share didn't increase that much, but it just shows that we have a stable base in Luton. 2,000 voters who were ready to vote Lib Dem, and now you said about 50 votes more. And
2,000. I'm sorry, 2,000 votes isn't a base. That's not a base.
No, but I would say 2,000 votes. 2,000 votes is a base. And the reason why I'm saying that is it was 6 votes in the recent Runcorn and Helsby by-election that decided an MP. So 2,000 votes, I would say, is a base, considering you're doing no campaigning. 2,000 people decided to go to the ballot box and vote Liberal Democrat, despite not seeing any campaign material put out by our party. Now, also with that, here's what I'd say is that you were talking about more funds for the Green Party, and I 100% agree with that. I do think they're going to get more funds. And you know what I think they're going to do with those funds? They're going to be smart, like I'm saying about voting smart and whatnot, and they're going to put that money in the seats that I was saying about, I think it's 39 seats that they were second place in. They're going to fund the campaigns there, and hopefully they're going to win the campaigns there. And I hope that the Greens get as much MPs as they can. But what are the Lib Dems going to do? They're going to do the same thing, right? And so I'm telling you, the Greens are not going to put much money into Luton. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm not going to talk on behalf of a party that I'm not I don't know what they're going to do, right? But I'm saying what would be smart for the Green Party is to do what I said, and what would be smart for the Lib Dems is to do what I said about they're putting the funds into Luton. And you were talking about the Workers' Party and the Independents, right? And that just shows that there is a big movement of people here that want Labour out based on their policies towards Israel, towards Palestine, and whatnot.
Yeah, and they're voting for communists. They're literally voting for communists, not liberals.
Yeah, but right? But I was door knocking, right, in 2024 for Sarah Owen, right? And I came across a good few Workers' Party members. And I'm telling you, no one voted, and I think this is very well known that no one voted for the Workers' Party for their communist agenda. They voted for the Workers' Party because they were disenfranchised with Labour over Palestine. And do you think that's true?
I think you're absolutely right that it was definitely around like Gaza, Palestine.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely reasonable on that. And yet, despite that fact, I mean, the policy in terms of what George Galloway's party and what a potential Corbyn Sultana party, which again, I think if we're going to look at the demographics of this seat, the kind of the constituency profile here, the most likely progressive challenge to Labour would be from a theoretical Corbyn Sultana party and probably not the Green Party, right? Again, I am agnostic in terms of the correct electoral strategy for a progressive coalition, which probably would include the Greens and under Zach Polanski and the potential Corbyn Sultana party. Like, Zach Polanski has already made intimations towards wanting to work with these people, you know. But regardless, right, they had very similar internationalist policy from the Lib Dems and the Workers' Party, and they looked at these two, right? One with a giant platform with, you know, again, funding from Lord Sainsbury, who's been a party since the 1980s, and chose a startup joke party that is essentially the vanity project from George Galloway, and to more than double the number of voters, right? Like, in terms of like the edge that was gained in terms of the broader policies that they were offering, they looked at two identical, broadly, Gaza policies, and then went, we're going to go with the communists instead. So,
So I would completely disagree with that. No, I know what you're saying, but I'd completely disagree with that point based on the point about funds and campaigning, right? George Galloway knew about this seat, knew how that he could gain this seat, and you know what he did? He put a heck lot of campaigning into it. And he got a well-known man, Dr. Yasir Rahman. Actually, no, sorry, that's the candidate for Luton South. He
Also,
had
Wahid
another.
Akbar.
Yeah, so he was the ex-mayor of Luton, the man of which you just said. And they appointed well-known people, right? They had a big campaign behind them. They were self-financed. These, what was his name again?
The Luton candidate for the Workers' Party, Wahid Akbar.
Wahid Akbar. So Wahid Akbar and Dr. Yasir Rahman, they both self-financed themselves and put in the campaign. I remember there was big banners saying "Vote Dr. Yasir Rahman for Luton South," right? And it was the same thing everywhere, right? Because they put out a big campaign. And so yeah, you're right in saying that the Workers' Party did gain a bigger proportion of the vote in Luton North and Luton South. You're 100% right on that. But that is because once again the Lib Dems didn't stand at all, campaign at all, and the Workers' Party massively did. And when it came to that, when it came to the prime time 2024, right? People looked at the banners on their buildings and they saw that and they didn't think, oh, wait, but I think I saw Lib Dem manifesto not too long ago or on Twitter talking about Palestine, but instead I'm going to vote for this communist party just because I saw their banner. They just happened to see their banner and they know that there's a pro-Gaza candidate, and that's what happened. And that's what happened to Shocker Adam and the other independent MPs, right? Because I'm sure, right, that many voters who vote for the Workers' Party and independents, they would resonate with Lib Dem values or Green values, right? But in the end,
I
they
think they would
voted.
resonate. I think they would resonate with Jeremy Corbyn's values. I think if there was a Corbyn
Yeah,
Sultana party, because obviously Wahid Akbar used to be a Labour member, so he's
yeah,
joined a party to the left of Labour to attack Labour from the left because he perceives them to not be left wing enough, both in international issues and one would assume, given how the kind of the platform of Labour has shifted rightwards on economic policy as well. Hence why they've gone to again the Communist Party that's
yeah,
running here rather than the Liberal Party, which is in my mind even like less progressive on the economy than the Labour Party is. So if I don't know how the Lib Dems would attract somebody like that, and again they would be offering policies that I believe aren't progressive. Again, the fulcrum on which this lies isn't just on the ability to beat Labour in this constituency; it's on the
yeah,
fact that I don't think that electing a Liberal Democrat would be a necessary upgrade, especially not on Sarah Owen, who's one of the less shit Labour MPs as well, you know? And again, like, I don't see how any Liberal Democrat, even from like a basic perspective, would be able to garner more votes in this, again, considering the demographics than a prospective Corbyn Sultana party would, given the deep ties Jeremy Corbyn specifically has to the internationalist movement that you want to represent, and we both represent. We both support internationalism. We both support multiculturalism and integrated societies. We both support protections against Muslims from the coming tide of Islamophobia that we're seeing right now. And the person who is the biggest platform in the country that has fought for these things the whole of its life, it's clearly Jeremy Corbyn. And so why someone would vote for again a party who, when you ask basically the entire country, no one can name you what they stand for, over a man who's consistently standard for all those values that both of us have consistently represented and that these voters want to vote for. Even on the basic level of who would be more likely to win rather than who has a better platform, I still don't see how you can get the Lib Dems to win this seat. And again, I think we're just gonna have to agree to disagree because I just don't see it, and we're just I think we're coming into a kind of circular conversation now.
yeah. And the thing is, I do see your point, but I just feel like your point is just from like a more outer view. But when you look into the inner workings and look into the constituency, you mentioned about Wahid Akbar, how would we be able to pull someone in like that? The answer is we have many. Few of our councillors are from Labour who are disenfranchised. Many of our members are from Labour who are disenfranchised. Wahid Akbar was the ex-mayor of Luton. We've recently brought in another mayor of Luton to join us. And my uncle, who was the mayor of Luton himself, is talking about joining the Liberal Democrats. That we are bringing in these people, right? Whether we see it or whether we don't. Can I just get a confirmation of whether you can hear me or not? Because I've just switched to mobile data for some reason.
Oh, yeah, cut out for a second there. But I can hear you again now.
Yep, sorry about that. Yeah, and I'd say that we are bringing in these people. And I'd say to you, you said about why would people vote for a party who no one even knows, no one knows their policies nationally. Well, I would say to you that the Greens garnered 2 million votes in the last election. If you ask basic people on the street who Adrian Ramsey is, I'd probably say 1 out of 100 people would probably know
Oh
the
yeah,
answer to that. And
you're not gonna. I mean, you've seen my content. You know, I'm not a briefcase defender, right? Like, I'm full
yeah,
on in the eco-populism over briefcase politics here. Like,
yeah,
I'm wholly in agreement here. But
yeah.
again,
But the point is that it was Adrian's party when he was the leader that the Greens won their biggest share of the vote, right?
yeah, and I think that was broadly because of Carla Denyer and not because of Adrian
Yeah, yeah,
Ramsey.
yeah. And firstly, I love Carla Denia, and that makes sense. But still, regardless, he is the co-leader, and whether that's a policy that they still want to ensue or not, hopefully they do vote in Zach and bring in that eco-populism that I'm so desperate to see.
Oh,
I would
actually,
just say
pause
my
one
point.
second. People in chat are asking, what is your personal opinion of Jeremy Corbyn?
Oh, well, do you want to know my personal opinion of Jeremy Corbyn? I
Hmm.
actually door knocked for Jeremy Corbyn in 2024, so I think
I
that
mean,
basically sums up my point on Jeremy
so
Corbyn.
like we both have like similar, like, I guess not necessarily explicit values, but we both kind of support the
Yeah,
people who represent similar values in terms of governance. We both big supporters of Jeremy
I
Corbyn.
yeah,
Like,
a hundred
you
percent.
like Zach Polanski, you like the idea of eco-populism, and
Yeah.
you're advocating here for the briefcase party. This doesn't make any sense to me.
So I understand your point. I'm basically everything you are, and yet I'm saying the exact opposite, right?
Again, you're advocating for a
But
party that wants to ban trade union donations from political parties. Like this is completely
why
incongruent to progressive political positioning.
they want to ban trade unions. They want to put in a restriction on funding for political parties, and I think
Yeah,
that
but yes, but for
100% is.
corporations and for rich people, not for like collections of workers. This is that would again be a way of getting the labor movement out of politics, which is a bad thing. Like, I'm a trade unionist first and foremost.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And how do we
Again,
conservatives, right?
I understand, right, that your position, the reason why you joined the Lib Dems is because on a local level they're pretty good opposition to Labour. I'm like,
Yeah,
fine, sure. I'm sure there are plenty Lib Dem councillors and Lib Dem oppositions that are good against bad things that Labour are doing, and likewise, that probably are even potentially even like, you look at the Reform mayor in Hull, who said that he defies the party position on net zero because it's good for the local economy. Luke Thingamajiggy, and he seems like a nice
yeah,
bloke, right? There are probably plenty of people who voted for him despite the fact that he was a Reform candidate.
yeah,
And I'm not necessarily opposed to this kind of stuff, but on a national policy level, broadly, and how we want to shape the discourse, change the political system in this country.
yeah,
Again, we probably have to wrap this up. It's been going over an hour now. In the
yeah,
on
yeah,
that
yeah,
political position, you've
yeah.
just I just again, like, the Lib Dems are just behind the Greens. They would be behind for me in terms of a Corbyn Sultana party, and even on polling, the latest from
Mhm.
Find Out Now showed that the potential Sultana Corbyn party that doesn't even exist would be ahead of the
Yeah,
Lib Dems nationally. And whilst I think it's
yeah,
reasonable to say that the Lib Dems have a really good footing in the southwest of the country that they can expand on and grow, I wouldn't. Again, very happy to say that it's great to support the Lib Dems in those areas where the Corbyn Party, Green Party, never going to win. Never going to win in
yeah,
a million years. Fine, not a problem.
yeah,
But in inner city constituencies, in progressive electorates, in diverse electorates, the 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 the, the base there is already progressive, and I think it would be a step backwards electing Lib Dems that are pushing for Lib Dems over
yeah,
a potential Green or Corbyn Sultana candidate. So, for example, in
yeah,
Walthamstow, there would be a really good Green candidate, or in Hackney North, Stoke Newington,
yeah,
Green. If Dan Abbott stood down, Green candidate, they're already polling in second place, and in these seats where
yeah,
independents are popular, Corbyn Party would clean up. And I don't see why anyone would want to dilute that potential with what's in my mind a weak source Liberal Democrat prospectus, when those resources are better spent in the richer rural
yeah,
areas where the Lib Dems already win lots of votes and could expand into,
yeah,
because the Lib Dem base at the moment is rich people. It's
yeah.
like, it's high
Well,
earners, right?
I
The
wouldn't
Lib
agree with
Dems
that,
in
but yeah,
2019, the Lib Dems got more votes in the six-figure earners than the Labour Party
right,
did, and they were a
right,
mainstream party, right? The Lib Dems are for, as in my mind, pride flag neoliberals.
right. I would completely. Okay, are we doing final notes, by the way?
Yes, go for it. Go for it. You get the last word. You get the last word.
Oh, thank you. I would disagree with that point, and the point is that Lib Dems. Are you basically saying that Lib Dems are not a party for us? It's more a party for the rich.
Yes, I am saying that. Yeah.
Okay. So I would completely disagree with that fact. And the reason why I completely disagree with that fact is because repeatedly they are pushing, whether we say that, whether you say they're progressive or not, they are progressive in my mind. Because if ending the two-child benefit cap, if investing in net zero, if investing heavily into the NHS and putting policies to tax the rich and making it hard for rich people to accumulate wealth and basically crowding out second homes for rich people, if that is not progressive, then to be honest, I don't know what is. And to go on with that, I would say the Labour Party is no way. I know you kept saying that the Labour Party is more progressive, but I would say the Labour Party is no way more progressive than the Lib Dems. Considering the fact, what are their major things that's happened? They've voted against the two-child benefit cap. They've voted to decrease PIP payments. They voted to abolish the winter fuel payments and their Gaza policy, right? And so if you can look at that and say, yes, the Lib Dems oppose all of these, but Labour is still more progressive than them, then I would just have to completely disagree. And with that point about my own constituency and whatnot, I would say that maybe we will agree to disagree. But I would say that in the coming months, in the last few months, we have received a growing momentum from activists and campaigners and people from the independency and Workers' Party activists and whatnot in Luton. And it's growing. A growing momentum is building in Luton that we are going to finally get rid of Labour. We are going to finally protect our parks, put housing in brownfield lands and not greenfield lands, right? We're finally going to get them out and whatnot. And
Okay,
I would say to
fair enough.
that, the worst thing
Actually,
you can do is...
before just
Sorry.
one more thing, because I still want you to let you have the last word. I wanted to ask another question.
Sorry.
How do you defend Lib Dem lords voting down the workers' rights bill?
Okay, so tell me more about the Workers' Rights Bill.
So it involved things like sick pay from day one, improved trade union rights, all that kind of malarkey.
Okay, and how did the Lib Dem MPs vote on the Workers' Rights Bill?
They abstained.
Okay, and so that
They
is
were,
my
and
proof.
they were whipped to abstain as well, rather
Yeah.
than voting for
So
it. Voting for progressive workers' rights, they voted to abstain. Again, my assumption is because they didn't want to look non-progressive to their progressive urban voters, and they didn't want to look anti-business to their rich voters, which is most of their voters.
yeah. So they abstained. They didn't vote against. They didn't vote for. 100% get that point. But we're talking about the Lords here, and you said about the Lords against them. All right.
Yeah, they were whipped to vote against with the
Yeah.
Tories.
Yeah. And let's just talk about the Lords for a second, right? The Lords are unelected people, and so how can I talk about unelected officials in the Commons, right? Whether
They're
the Lib
whipped.
Dem,
They're
Tory,
whipped
Labour,
by the Lib Dems. The Lib Dem, like
yeah, yeah,
the party, the Liberal Democrat Party, chooses how to whip their lords. Right? They don't choose how the
yeah,
lords
yeah,
enter the government because that's done by
yeah,
listing. But
yeah,
the actual they were told by their superiors, by the people who decide on
yeah,
what policy positions they should take, to vote against the Workers' Rights Bill. Like that's
yeah,
like one of the good things that Labour are doing from one of the good, previously good, because he's a bit of a traitor now, Angela Rayner. I mean, mostly from Andy
yeah,
MacDonald,
yeah,
like one of the Socialist campaign group who worked on these reforms. And whilst the MPs abstained, they couldn't even vote for it. And then when it came
yeah,
for laws, they voted with the Tories
yeah, yeah,
against it. That's
yeah,
that's like disqualification for me in terms of
yeah,
part of
yeah.
a progressive coalition.
And you know what? I would say that makes sense, right? You've heard my thoughts here today. I'm pro eco-populist, I'm pro Zach, I'm pro Jeremy Corbyn, and that makes sense. And I'm completely against for what happened as well, right? But here's what I'd say. And you said that they were whipped. The Lords were whipped to do so. And but whipping, right, as a system, who is more affected, right? MPs or Lords. Lords get get tenure for life, right? And whether or not they're whipped or not, they can't change it. MPs is very different. They can lose the whip, as we've seen with Labour so many times. Whenever progressive people actually finally talk out,
Sorry, I'm
within
sorry to cut across you again here, but like
no, sorry,
that's
take
like
it.
that supports my argument here. Like the
Yeah,
Lords have no constituents that they have to pander to, right? The people
yeah,
MPs can get voted out. Lords can vote with whatever they want to do because they have their positions for life. So they're more
and
likely
then
to
what?
vote
Yeah,
in line with their own positions, which actually
yeah,
means that because they're unelected and they don't have constituents to represent, they're more likely to be ideological in the way that they vote, which means that the
yeah,
Lib Dem Lords are that's a conscientious choice that they've made to vote
Yeah,
against, because they know that they don't have any democratic reprisals, right? So that lends to the idea that the abstention from the Commons MPs was because they wanted to vote against, but they wanted to avoid democratic reprisals from the electorate that's more progressive than them. That's what that says to me. I'm sorry. And again, I'm sorry. I did apologise for cutting across you. Again, please make your final points.
No,
As
no,
we've
no,
been
no,
going over an hour. Like, your final statement. Go ahead. Sorry.
100%. 100%. No, no, no. No, and your point makes sense. I 100% see your point. But the thing is that I'd say to that is, I really wouldn't talk about the Lords in a way that was going to be like, oh yeah, well the Lords are this and the Lords are that. The Lib Dems are, the Lib Dems are pushing a policy to make the House of Lords elected. Yeah, and so we're not going to have this problem. And I do agree that it's a problem. The problem of the Lords, and they do what they want. They're unelected and whatnot. That's a problem, and what they did was a problem, and what they did was wrong. That's what I think, right? But the Lib Dem policy would, if the Lib Dems got into power tomorrow, something like this would never happen again, because they're pushing a policy that, oh, the Lords should be elected, and the way they voted on the Workers' Rights Bill, it wouldn't happen again, for example.
I find that difficult to believe, given the interests that the Liberal Democrat Party have traditionally represented, and they said that they wanted to support businesses in their manifesto as well. Like, it seems to me that whilst they, again,
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with supporting business.
I mean, I'm a socialist. I believe that workers should own the means of production.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. But in today's economy, right? Say we're not gonna have a socialist existence tomorrow, right? But if
I mean,
businesses,
I
small
think that's
businesses
right.
as
Like,
well,
and it's fine to say I think supporting business is like a fine heuristic, but it should not come at the
yeah,
expense of workers, which is what that vote was.
yeah, 100%, 100%. But here's what I'd say when we talk about business, right? My point is that a socialist system is not coming tomorrow, and with that, if our small businesses, not big businesses like we we're talking about, not with your Facebooks or whatever, big companies that are scamming us, and workers, like Amazon. Amazon's a great example. I'm talking about small businesses, small local businesses, high streets, pubs, and whatnot. If they are thriving, right? If they are thriving and they're finally under, not under cost of living threats and whatnot, we as a society, our GDP would increase. Do you think that? Am I right or wrong in saying that?
I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think it's perfectly reasonable. But again, like, that would be GDP increasing for business owners, would be the people
Yeah.
who would benefit from that if we do not have policy to ensure that there is adequate remuneration for workers, which is what the
Yeah.
Liberal Democrat Lords voted against. And again, like,
And so when
I think getting, by the way, just one is it getting caught up on the Lords is that there was a Lib Dem whip to respond. It's the whip themselves that
yeah,
I have the problem with here, not the Lords being Lords, right? So it's the Lib Dem whips
yeah,
that are the issue
yeah,
here. So again, this belies the true motivations of Liberal Democrat governance. And again, like,
yeah.
this is I'm a trade unionist. I need better trade union rights to be able to redistribute wealth, and
Mm.
that's something that the Liberal Democrats, and that's not just something that they've recently opposed. That's something that
Yeah.
they have always opposed. And
Okay.
this is
So
yeah.
would you say, right? Okay, I don't know if this is a bit of a weird thing to say, right? But do you think that the Labour Party and Labour whips want to see Palestinians shot?
Um, I don't think anyone wants to see them shot. I believe that they're beholden to American unipolarity and geopolitical interests.
Yeah.
I believe that they put the interests of the special relationship between the UK and the United States above defending the Palestinians from genocide. And you know what? You want to, if internationalist policy, Layla Moran is better than David Lammy on this. Completely
Mm.
uncontroversial take to that Layla Moran is infinitely superior to David Lammy in terms of Israel
Yeah.
policy and policy in terms of moving away from America. We agree with this, but then again, so would the Greens on this too. And so would
Yeah.
a potential Corbyn Sultana party as well. So I
But
don't
the
think
whole
there's any
point
difference
that
between
should
Green and
be,
Lib Dems on international trade policy and
yeah,
on relationships with America and with Israel.
yeah. So Um, here's what I'd say is that when it comes to with our GDP increasing, help the workers, and here's what I'd say under a Lib Dem policies, under a Lib Dem government, yes, they will. The reason why that would be is because, oh, we're gonna have a fairer tax system, right? So the increase in tax revenue from GDP increasing, right, is going to go more to the pockets of normal people than it would under a Labour government, under a Conservative government. under a
Well,
reform
no, it
government,
wouldn't, because
right?
the taxes, the overall taxation as a percentage of GDP is higher under Labour than it would be under the Liberal Democrats because of the national insurance rise. So no, they wouldn't be. They just wouldn't be.
So okay, so when it comes to disabled people, and when it comes
Oh yeah,
to
yeah.
welfare,
I mean, I've already. I'm not conceded because I already agreed with you on this. That we both admit that we both agree that the Labour Party's policy on the welfare state. I think that on specifically on the disability cuts, you know, like their U-turn on the winter fuel payment to make it so that there is a tax taper to ensure that people who are richer have it taxed back from them. That's
yeah,
exactly the plan that I said they should have done in the first place. So
yeah,
that
yeah, I've
U-turn has
seen
solved that
this.
issue for me. But the
Yeah,
fact that the reprisal on Pip only happened because of the backbench rebellion rather than because of any
yeah,
kind of ideological position on this. Again,
yeah,
something that McSweeney supports, but the Labour MPs clearly, obviously, don't support, at least not in a big enough numbers that they could
yeah,
pass the legislation through. I think this legislation was demonic, quite frankly, and
yeah,
happy to agree that the Lib Dems are preferable on Labour to this, but then so are the Greens, so are the Corbyn Sultana Party, so are the SNP, for example, so are
yeah,
Plaid Cymru for people who live in the constituent parts of the United Kingdom.
yeah. So maybe it is best we wrap it up because I just had a look at the time. But what I would say to that is,
But yeah, do like I said, do like an actual final statement now, because I said half an hour ago we do a final statement.
yeah, yeah. Here's what I'd say to everyone, and here's what I'd say in general, right? Lots of the policies that the Lib Dems push out, you agree with, right? If you're on this channel, although I know people from different politics beliefs come on this channel, but if you're on this channel, if you're on Navarro Media, you're predominantly left wing, right? You're more likely to be left wing, and the policies that are in the Lib Dem manifesto, you yourself are likely to agree with and 100% resonate with. And whether it's on the economy, fairer taxation, on healthcare, on free school meals, on education, on care, um, on net zero, we're we're fully with you, right? We're fully with the Greens on multiple things, and we're fully on the Greens with foreign affairs as well, whether that's Israel, whether that's Israel Palestine, whether that's Iraq, right? And we have consistently been on the side of Middle Eastern affairs and atrocities happening throughout the world. And so, what I'm saying, and the overall point that I'm pushing out, is that be smart with your vote, right? Don't just think that, oh, here's what I'm mainly saying, that if you have a green candidate or a left wing candidate that you know is not going to win, don't go and think now that, oh, I shouldn't vote. We saw that the turnout at the last general election was 60%. That's the lowest, right? In a time of where we're saying there's so many parties finally coming about, we always said that two-party politics was a reason why turnout was so low. But we've seen at the last election that different other parties can do well, and we're not in that same system anymore. And yet turnout was still so low. It's because we're feeling disenfranchised. And if you have a seat where you know that the Lib Dems can do well and you resonate with Lib Dem values, don't be shy to vote with the Lib Dems, because that's what I'm doing. And I resonate with the Lib Dems, and I resonate with the Lib Dem councillors and people around me. And so that is basically my closing statement. And I say to you, Helena, that I'm a major fan, and I really appreciate you giving me this time today and having time to debate me and whatnot. You did really well. Um, and I'd say that when it comes to the Lib Dems, 100% champion people voting in whatever constituency you think they have a chance in beating whatever candidate is. Because I do think we are at a war with reform, with the Conservatives, you as a trans individual, and me as a Muslim. They're coming for our groups, right? And I'm not saying that you need to be part of these groups to vote for Lib Dems or Greens, but they're coming for people who are vulnerable, and they're looking for scapegoats. They're not going to make the economy better. They're going to ruin us. So if you have a chance to get them out, please use it. Please use your vote. And thank you so much for having me.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure. I appreciate you jumping into the Lion's Den today. Do you want to shout out your socials for chat?
Sure, why not? On Instagram, I am Usman Habib. UMAANHABIBI, and it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure.
No worries, no worries. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and maybe I'll see you out canvassing on the opposition side of the street in a
Or maybe you'll
in a
see me
future
with you,
Luton
because I
election
was
near you.
campaigning with Jeremy Corbyn not too long ago.
True, true, true. No worries. Take care. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Bye.